The area only had one missing person, but that was one too many as far as Neve was concerned. Part of her wanted to give the family closure, but there was no goddamn way she looked forward to making that visit. Maybe it was a tourist, a lone hiker who hadn't told anyone where they were going. It was possible. It happened occasionally. Charlotte's boots skidded on a loose rock. Neve reached up to steady her. She really didn't want to break the larger woman's fall at the bottom of the bank. Plus, the guys would make lesbian jokes for the next month, regardless of the fact that both Neve and Charlotte were in relationships with men. When they finally reached bottom, they had to pick their way along the rocky terrain bordering the river to where the falls growled and splashed. A young man was sitting partway up the steep incline. Neve recognized him as Gareth Hughes, one of the caretakers of the park. He was pale and perched on a rock about 10 feet below the bridge that allowed hikers to cross over the falls. "Climbed all that way down just to climb up again," Charlotte muttered, watching where she stepped. "Sounds about right." Neve smiled slightly. "Better to come down the path than that." She pointed where Gareth sat. That was just an invitation for a broken neck, which was what had probably happened to the person he'd found. There was a path from the parking lot to the upper level of the falls as well, but it was tricky terrain. Finally, they reached the base of the falls, where they were soon joined by Gareth's brother, Owen, and Neve's fellow state trooper, Vicky Moore, who was in uniform and the first on the scene. There were others as well, but Neve was primary since it was a female body. She'd been looking for Tala Lewis for 2 months, ever since the girl went missing. Neve and Charlotte suited up to preserve the scene and made their way 20 feet up the side of the falls. The rocks and vegetation were wet from melt and rushing water, making it a slippery mess. "Be careful," Neve cautioned as her own toes slipped on a slimy patch. "Damn booties." "Not my first rodeo, girlie," Charlotte replied, deftly avoiding the same spot. Somehow, she managed to look cool and graceful, while a tiny trickle of sweat ran down Neve's back. Gareth reached down to give her a hand up the last couple of feet. Then, when Neve stepped to the side, he helped Charlotte as well. The bridge was only a few feet away, a good place for anyone else to stand so as not to contaminate the scene any more than it already was. "Where is it?" Neve asked the younger man. He pointed to a pile of rocks that looked as though it had been part of a landslide at one time. Behind them, Neve saw alders, more rocks, and a boot. A boot that looked as though it might still have a foot in it. She swallowed. She'd been doing this job for 10 years now, and it never got any easier. She and Charlotte approached in single file, Neve stepping on the hard rocks in an attempt to preserve the scene as much as possible. She paused on top of the largest boulder and looked down. Shit. The body had been a young woman at one time. It was surrounded and still partially covered by rocks. Long black hair stuck to the scalp and tangled with debris on the ground. She wore a puffy purple jacket, ripped and stained with blood, and jeans stuffed into black boots. Her skin was almost the same color as her coat, with patches of red. Freezer burn, Neve thought. It wasn't the bloat that got to her, or even the smell. Thank God it was still too cool for bug activity, and the rocks had kept her covered until melt-off started. No. What got to Neve was the grimace, and there always seemed to be a grimace. It was the one reminder that what they were looking at used to be alive. The girls revealed a slightly crooked eye tooth. Charlotte began taking photos with her phone. "It's her, isn't it?" Neve nodded, her throat tight. They both knew they'd have to compare dental records before they could say anything publicly. But there was no doubt in her mind. It's Tala Lewis. And it was obvious her death hadn't been an accident. The moment Audrey Harte saw the unmarked police car pull into the drive, she knew something bad had happened. Detective Neve Graham was a friend, but things had been strained between them ever since Neve made it clear she didn't fully trust Audrey, or her fiancé, Jake. It wasn't that Audrey blamed her. Neve had